In this video, we'll look at radians and angles. So this will pretty much be a lot of definitions kind of stuff that we will make use of later on. So we'll talk about the radian, we'll talk about the relationship between radians and degrees, and we will talk about standard position and coterminal angles. The definition of radian measure. If a circle of radius 1 is drawn with the vertex of an angle at its center, then the measure of this angle in radians, abbreviated as RAD, is the length of the arc that subtends the angle. So the length of the arc that subtends the angle is this bit right here. Looking at our leftmost circle, it's this bit here. That's the length of the arc that subtends this angle right here. So this is kind of the great trick of what we've been working on for the past bit. We've been working on trigonometry in terms of a length along the edge of the unit circle. And that's kind of what this is. This is exactly what it is. This length along the edge of the unit circle is the angle subtended by that arc. So 1 radian would bring us up before pi over 2. Pi over 2 radians brings us up to the y-axis. Pi radians would bring us all the way around back to the x-axis, etc. and so forth. So that's the measure of each of these angles. The first one has 1 radian, the second one has pi over 2 radians, and this third angle is pi radians. So that's our first definition. The next one is the relationship between degrees and radians. So, since the circumference of the circle is 2 pi, and it takes 360 degrees to get around, it would make sense that 180 degrees would be pi radians to get halfway around the circle. So therefore, 1 radian is equivalent to 180 over pi degrees, and 1 degree is pi over 180 radians. To convert degrees to radians, we multiply by pi over 180, and to convert radians to degrees, multiply by 180 over pi. So as an example of something that we should know, we should have an expectation of what the answer is. If we look at pi over 2 radians, and we want to convert that to degrees, we multiply it by 180 over pi. So the pi's will cancel out, and we're left with 180 over 2, which is 90. So pi over 2 radians is the same as 90 degrees. And that kind of visually makes sense when we look at where we land at pi over 2. The y-axis and the x-axis create a 90-degree angle. So this is how you convert between degrees and radian. So now as we begin to work with angles and radians, and as we kind of trace out radian and angle measures, we need to have a kind of frame of reference from which to work with these measures. So we say an angle is in standard position if it is drawn in the xy plane with its vertex at the origin and its initial side on the positive axis. What that just means is that when we trace out an angle, we usually think of it as beginning at one place and ending at one place. So we might say that this is the initial side, and then we trace through an angle here, like that. So the initial side would be this x-axis there, and this would be the terminal side. So terminal side here, and initial side. So it's in standard position if it's in the xy plane with its vertex at the origin here and its initial side on the positive x-axis. So like we were working with the unit circle, we start kind of on the positive x-axis and then trace along from there. If we did another one maybe over here, this would be in standard position with this angle right there, and other angle measures like that. So then we would say that two angles in standard position are coterminal if their sides coincide. So that is, consider this first angle here, like that. And then maybe I'll do another angle like all the way around, like that, has already completed one rotation and happens to have that same terminal side. So standard position, we start on the x-axis, positive x-axis, and then rotate counterclockwise around. And coterminal angles are like what we discussed when we were looking at the unit circle, when we have pi over 4 and 9 pi over 4. Those land us at the same terminal points. So terminal, coterminal, that should make you think in the same direction for what these mean.